Welcome to the Midweek Bible Study of Ellendale Church of Christ. We're looking at James chapter 3. We want to begin in verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Understanding is a synonym for wisdom, but it deals more with the intellectual knowledge side of wisdom. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts. Wisdom is knowing how to use those facts. The book of Proverbs has a great deal to say about wisdom, understanding that sometimes wisdom and God are almost synonymous or identical, since God is the source of all wisdom. If you look at Proverbs chapter 3, beginning in verse 13, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than the gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. And then we go to Proverbs chapter 9. Let's back up to verse 7. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, but he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. When he talks about the fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom, he's not talking about terror. He's talking about deep reverence and respect that lead us to humbly turn to God, submit to God, and live by the will of God. He says, for by me, that is wisdom, your days will be multiplied, years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. There is a direct connection between wisdom from above and obedience to the commands of God. If we back up to Deuteronomy chapter 4, we're going to look Deuteronomy 4, verses 5 and 6. Say, I have taught you statutes and rules as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the people who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Jesus connects wisdom with doing his will in Matthew 7, beginning in verse 24 through verse 27. If you remember, he says, the wise builder is the one who hears his words and does them or acts on them. Then when the rains fall, the floods come, the winds blow, that house will not fall. But the foolish builder is the one who hears the words of Christ, but fail to act on them or to do them. Then when the rains fall, the floods come, the winds blow, the fall of the foolish man's house will be great. So if you and I want to have our life stand in the day of judgment, it will be built on our sincere efforts to live the will of Christ. If we go to 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15, 2 Timothy chapter 3, want to look at verse 15. He talks about Timothy, how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. The sacred writings which are able to make you wise. Wisdom can be gleaned from the scriptures. However, the world would not hold a book that required a law for every conceivable circumstance. So God has given us, as Peter says, 2 Peter 1 verse 3, all things that pertain to life and godliness. So everything we need as far as the will of Christ, the teachings of Christ, the laws of Christ, are there for us. However, applying those laws and those principles in everyday life sometimes does not provide us with a thou shalt not or thou shalt, in which case we need God's wisdom to know how to apply his laws, his will, to specific circumstances we encounter. And that's where we go back to James, back to the very first chapter. If you remember, he says in verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. If we pray for wisdom and we believe God is going to supply it without doubting, then it will be. It may not come instantly. God's not going to send us a text message or an email, but in his providential way, he will make it possible for us to have the wisdom we have requested if we have believing prayer. Going back to our text, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Wisdom is not just what we know, but it's revealed in how we live. If we go back to Matthew chapter 11, I'm going to look at Matthew, the 11th chapter, verse 19, something that Jesus says about wisdom. Matthew 11 and verse 19, where he will say, wisdom is justified by her deeds. The New American says vindicated by her deeds. In other words, biblical wisdom from above, will reveal itself in our conduct. Wisdom is seen in our deeds, in our good conduct or good behavior. He talks about let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Meekness includes humility, consideration, thoughtfulness, thinking of others. It includes doing for others, as we will see. For example, we know that true religion consists in helping the fatherless and the widows. In chapter 2, 14 through 17, we know that saving faith involves supplying the needs of those who need food or clothing. And so it is with wisdom. And we'll see this more as we get deeper into the text. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth, literally lie to the truth. When you see bitter jealousy, selfish ambition is descriptive of the person who will do whatever it takes by any means to get whatever it wants, no matter who is hurt in the process. So bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your hearts. Of course, that's the place where our character, where our purpose, where our conduct originates. Do not boast, those who would brag about their selfish, ambitious pursuits and be false to the truth, lie to the truth. They're obviously opposing the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly. That is, it originates with man and not with God. It's unspiritual. It could be said come from the natural man, and certainly not from the will of God, which by its very nature is spiritual. And it's demonic. There's a type of faith that's demonic. There's a type of wisdom that's demonic. That means that the source is Satan. Where there is bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, you will find all kinds of strife and discord. If you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12 in verse 20, I think you'll see some of the consequences of this kind of demonic wisdom. Paul says, "For I fear that perhaps when I come, I may find you not as I wish. You may not find me, or you may find me not as you wish, that perhaps there may be quarreling, jealousy, anger, hostility, slander, gossip, conceit, disorder." These are the products of demonic faith, which, as we'll see, is the very opposite of true wisdom that comes from God. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice, something similar to what we just saw in 2 Corinthians 12 and verse 20. And then he begins to use 7 characteristics of the wisdom from above, that is, from God. It's first pure. Pure as far as motives, no ulterior motives. It's pure as far as being single-minded, devoted wholeheartedly to obeying the will of God. All things that pertain to holiness and godliness would be incorporated in purity. So it's first of all pure, then peaceable. One version says peace-loving. We know in the Beatitudes, Jesus pronounces a blessing on the peacemakers. Peaceable means people who are first and foremost at peace with God, peace with themselves, and then endeavoring to be at peace with others. Unlike the demonic wisdom, where there is jealousy, disorder, all the things that we saw involved in 2 Corinthians 12 and verse 20. Peaceable doesn't mean, of course, it's peace at any price. We should not seek peace that compromises the truth. He says it's gentle. Here again we see thoughtfulness, consideration, humility. Abraham Lincoln was described by Carl Sandburg as a man of steel and velvet. He could be a man of steel when it came to his convictions and standing for what he believed to be right. But at the same time, he could be a man of velvet, gentle in dealing with other people, with the hurting, with those who were the outcast or misfortunate in life. But being able to be kind, and I think gentleness is full of kindness in dealing with others. He says it's open to reason. This is the person who can be persuaded. They don't think they know it all. They're teachable. They're willing to learn. They're easy to work with, easy to live with. They're willing to listen to those who may disagree with them. They can disagree without being disagreeable. And then he says they're full of mercy. To be full of something means to be controlled by it. And mercy, biblically speaking, is not just something you feel, like compassion. It's revealed in what you do. If we go to Luke chapter 10, you'll recognize this as the parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10. If we look at verse 30, he described a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He falls among robbers. He's stripped. They beat him and depart, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, and keep in mind that the Jews looked with disdain on the Samaritans, and the man apparently who had been robbed and left half dead was a Jew. But as he journeyed, came to where he was. When he saw him, he had compassion. But notice he didn't stop there. He went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come." Now, he has told this to a lawyer who asked the question, who is my neighbor? He was trying to justify himself. So Jesus asked him in verse 36, which of you 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? Listen to what he says. The one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and feel likewise. That's not what he said, is it? He says, you go and do likewise. Mercy is not just feeling pity or compassion. It's supplying the needs of those who are hurting. So if we are full of mercy, then it will be revealed. For example, like pure religion, taking care of the widows and orphans, like true faith, saving faith, in chapter 2, verses 14 through 17, supplying the needs of those who are without clothing, without food. And here mercy proves itself by being demonstrated in our actions, in our acts of service and compassion. And good fruits. That is, the life that we live, if it's lived by wisdom, is very practical. We seek to do the will of God to the glory of God. And as someone has said, that the path that to all that is good is listening to God and obeying God. Because without God, there would be no faith, there'd be no peace, there'd be no wisdom, there'd be no righteousness. But we bear the good fruit, such as those 9 virtues that make up the fruit of the Spirit, and the fruit of good works. We let our light shine before others in such a way that they may see our good works and glorify our Father who is in heaven. It's also impartial. It's not influenced by a person's appearance or position. It's like in the opening verses of chapter 2, it's impartial in the way that it deals with others in the service that's rendered for others. Some versions will say unwavering. That is, the consistency between the person's life, between their words and their actions. And then he says, it is sincere. It's obviously not hypocritical. Someone has said it's like being like children, where you don't say one thing to a person's face and then say something else behind their back. Someone was telling about a statement heard on a TV program, and they said, flatter your boss, it works. Obviously, flattery based on deceit, based on lies, is a path of foolishness. Plus, it's not the path of wisdom, because wisdom is sincere. It's not hypocritical at all. A hypocrite is someone who pretends to be something they are not. But those governed by God's wisdom are genuine, sincere. Then he said, a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. That those who are peacemakers will reap a harvest of righteousness. There's a direct connection between wisdom, righteousness, and peace. And he tells us here that those who make peace will reap a harvest of righteousness. Well, I thank you for participating in our study tonight. I hope you will join us again next week, where we will begin with James chapter 4 and verse 1. Again, I'm grateful for your participation. Hope you'll be with us again next Wednesday.